So I first became a dad 8 years ago, and that totally changed my life, because at that point, up until that point, I'd always, my eyes were always too big for my stomach. You know, I was always sort of thinking, oh, why wasn't I achieving this? Why wasn't I better at that? Why wasn't I doing this kind of work? And always beating myself up. When my son came along, life became a lot clearer and simpler, because my priorities, rather than sort of going outwards and having too many, suddenly became very sharp. It was, okay, family first, and then, you know, family, health, work. Success for me suddenly changed from sort of status, promotion, cash, into actually good work that I could do that provided for my family and meant I could provide not just financially but also emotionally and from a time perspective, so being there. So that revelation was amazing, but it was this tension between being successful from a working perspective and being successful from being a great partner and being a great dad has always been a tension. I guess it probably always will be. But it came to a head maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, when I was trying to get my kids out for school and nursery one morning. And I had a particularly big, important meeting on that morning, you know, a train I had to catch. So I was, you know, dressed smart, had everything kind of ready to go, and my kids just weren't ready to go. And I lost it. I just bellowed at them in a way that only a stressed out man can, and it was very loud. Thankfully, the kids didn't really seem to sort of register that much. I ended up picking them up, putting their shoes on, putting their coats on, and kind of putting them outside the door physically. And they zoomed off happily on their scooters. And I was just stomping down the road, seething at the kind of the stress I was under, and why weren't they kind of, you know, getting things ready on time, etc. And I just caught myself, and I realised that in that moment I was an angry dad, and that was never the kind of dad I wanted to be. So the next question is, well, what kind of dad do I want to be? And my dad's brilliant, but the world, you know, we live in a very different part of the world, and the world's very different at the moment to when I was raised. And so I got thinking, what are the other kind of male role models out there? And they're massively unhelpful too. You know, you've got the 1950s emotionally distant disciplinarian dad, not what I want to be. You've got the kind of Hugh Grant, Leslie Nielsen, well-meaning, but just generally a bit shit dad, you know, doesn't deliver, can't hold it together. And neither of those two things were particularly helpful. So I set out asking other dads. And over time, what happened, it went from conversations, which in the beginning were quite hard to have because men tend not to open up about this sort of thing, emotional things. But over time, it got a bit easier. And then the guys I was talking to said, you know, you should be publishing this, you should be doing something with it, because it's great for us to have this conversation. And I've certainly got a lot out of it personally, and they had as well. So I started doing that, and then it's kind of grown over the years. And I think what I've realised is that all of the things that I struggle with, you know, this sort of career success versus family and time, is something that every man and obviously every parent struggles with. The kind of typically sort of being present and patient for men as well are two really big issues. And so I've actually, through this work, been able to understand and try different things out that have helped me be better at all of those things. Not to say that it's kind of, you know, tick, solved, crossed off the list, done, but I've certainly got a lot better at it and have been able to help many other men get better. I mean, I think, and I still do, that initial challenge of being successful as a man tends to be sort of connected to your work, and, you know, whether that's how much you get paid or what, you know, how cool your job is, that tension is still there. And recently I was faced with a very difficult decision. I'd sort of spent pretty much a year working with in a startup. Was going really well, the business was growing, but for the last 3 months I've been deeply unhappy, because the ambitions of the business were really high, which is great, but the ways to achieve those ambitions were very tight and rigid, and that meant that I was just very stressed and not really there, either physically for my family, or when I was there physically, not there mentally or emotionally, because my brain was always going about the next thing I needed to sort. And I remember the moment of seeing this come out in my kids' behaviour, and I just thought, that's it, that's like the last straw.